Welcome to the City of Madeira Beach Local Planning Agency Planning Commission meeting, 6 p.m. Monday, August 3rd, 2020. Agenda item number 1, call to order. Number 2, roll call, please.
Commissioner Preston?
Here.
Commissioner Kerr?
Here.
Commissioner Rappa? Here. Commissioner Hearn? Here. Commissioner Wyckoff?
Here.
Chairman Noble?
Here.
Did I miss anybody?
Commissioner Belowski is out, excused out.
Yes, so she's absent. We wish her well. Approval of the minutes, agenda item number 3. Any problem with the minutes from last meeting? Not sure we got a copy of them.
No, you did not. We weren't able to finish them.
Okay, so we'll
have them next time.
push that to next month. And agenda item number 4, public comment. The public can view the meeting by clicking the public meetings button on the front page of the city website, www.madeirabeachfl.gov. How's that going, Linda? Is that working well, or have you had any feedback?
Yeah, we have for the planning, not as much for the Planning Commission, but we've had a lot of feedback from Board of Commissioners on specific items. So people have been taking advantage of the opportunity to make comment in that way. We've also had calls when people have questions. We get emails and also get mail comments for various types of meetings. So
nothing to add to the meeting tonight from the outside public comment. Okay, agenda item number 5, new business, A, mobility element.
Mr. Chair?
Jerry?
Jerry Murphy, for the record, do you have public present that wish to comment?
Well, would they comment before or after?
No, there are people here. So.
Yeah.
It would be now.
Okay. Go back to agenda item number 4, public comment. Yeah, I thought that was just referring to the new procedure, and then they would comment when we got to the item.
Well, you really don't have items per se.
Right, if they wanted to comment on the mobility element. Do we have any public comment from the crowd this evening? Anybody wish to say anything? We will close the public comment section 4 and move back to number 5, new business, A, mobility element. I believe Jerry has a presentation or something to say about it.
Sort of a brief discussion. So in your agenda item, you've got sort of a one-page cheat sheet that we've kind of been working off. And what we're doing now, sort of 2 things. We're looking at, obviously, impact fees, as we have been all along, or what I call proportionate share development fees. But we'll just use the shorthand. I will try and do better. How's that?
Perfect.
My focus will be here, but I'm thinking of you all. So we successfully kicked off the level of service standards ordinance. We'll be bringing that back to you next month, and that sets up the basis for the fees. Now we're looking at the forward view of the mobility plan and mobility fees. So if you're going to get fees, you want to have something you're doing with those fees, and that's sort of the future of your mobility plan. We're also looking in the long term at the evaluation and appraisal of the entire comprehensive plan. And you'll recall from the level of service ordinance that one of the things we did is rename the transportation element to the mobility element. And that's kind of in keeping with the practice around the state of looking more comprehensively at how we get around not just automobiles. So what we've talked about, I think a few months ago, you were initially given this, what I call the Duany plan, and what we're doing tonight is, having had a chance to take a look at that, we want to get, particularly from you, if there are things in the Duany plan that don't make sense anymore, we want to pull those out and discard them. And if those are taken out, then what we want to do is take the rest of it as it refers to mobility and distill that into a mobility plan that will set up the basis for looking forward, what we're going to do in the city in terms of improving our mobility services. So, a couple of things in terms of timeline. We'll be talking to the Board of Commissioners on Wednesday about that specifically. They want to kind of know where we're at in the process. You're certainly welcome to come to that meeting, and I know when you're there, they often call on you to provide some input about what we've done here, so I encourage you to be here on Wednesday night if you can. What we're looking at now is tonight we're going to talk about the Duaney Plan and how we can extract certain things from that into a mobility plan. In September, we're going to bring back the level of service ordinance that you saw as sort of a working draft for an actual recommendation to the Board of Commissioners. And we hope to have the standards that will be the level of service standards, the data necessary to actually say what those standards are going to be in terms of square footage per square footage. That's data-driven, and so if we can't get the data, we'll have a little difficulty there, but hopefully we'll have that by then, and that will cover the culture and recreation, mobility, and public safety. Then in October, we want to bring back a draft mobility plan and a mobility fee ordinance. So that would be the first of the 3 impact fees that we're looking at for a recommendation to the Commission. If you've followed the Commission meetings at all, I think you're probably aware of the fact that they want to fast-track this as much as possible. So it's an aggressive schedule. If we get another COVID event or whatever we can't foresee, you know, we may have to stub our toe a little bit there, but we're going to try our best to move this forward as aggressively as possible. And then in November, we will continue on with the EAR effort. We were recently awarded a DEP resiliency planning grant to look at the coastal management element and to comply with the parallel flood requirements the state adopted in 2015. So that'll be a primary focus, but we have state money to support that, so that's a good thing. And then beyond November and into next year, we'll be working on the various elements in the comprehensive plan to update those for the evaluation and appraisal report. That is due December of 2021? 2022.
Yeah, May.
The big thing. So tonight, in terms of looking at the Duaney Plan, one of the things that I want to sort of caution you about is not spending too much focus on Gulf Boulevard and this Tom Stewart Causeway. Those are county, state roads. There's not a lot we can do with them. I'm sure we can, you know, if we had a pot of money and we're willing to give it to the county or the state, they would be willing to do certain things in that regard. But it's a lot more collaborative and cooperative than that. There's an MPO involved. So in terms of our city mobility plan, those are probably not the highest priorities. I think our highest priorities need to be the local streets, and particularly where those local streets maybe intersect Gulf Boulevard or the Causeway, if there are concerns or problems or opportunities for improvement there. Also focusing on where we might go in taking our city streets forward. So some of the ideas that have been kicked around are the potential for a parking garage that would also be a transit hub where people would come and park and then get into transit, whether it be PSTA, the Pinellas County's transit, or a local transit that might be provided by the city itself for the citizens and visitors. Another idea would be the redevelopment plan for Village Way and Pelican Lane. That's in the Duaney Plan, and it talks about how those streets could be made to work a little bit better. And then thirdly, landscape plans for the streets. One of the Duaney recommendations is that the streets be landscaped not consistently, but with maybe different vegetation or things like that to give different identities to the various neighborhoods. One of the things that our experience has shown is that resort communities like Madeira Beach are sort of play and stay places, so people come on vacation, they play, they look around, they come back maybe next year, or maybe they don't, and they start to say, you know, I really like Madeira Beach, and when I retire from up north, which is everything north of Florida, I'm going to come and go to Madeira Beach, and I've looked at, you know, homes on Parsley or homes on wherever, and I like the area. The idea being that, visitors utilize your local streets for not just locals. People bicycle around the neighborhoods and walk around the neighborhoods and see what's going on and get to know Madeira Beach. And after they've played, for several years on vacation, they may retire here. And that's a constant. Anyone in the real estate business knows that that's kind of a constant turnover. So those are sort of the higher type things that I'd like you to focus on. But especially what we're trying to distill out of tonight is if there's something in this Duany plan that no longer makes sense, let's identify it and not work on it, because otherwise we'll take all the things that work in the Duany plan and distill those into a mobility plan moving forward. So any questions right now, Mr. Preston?
Yes, I know you didn't want to spend too much time on Gulf Boulevard, but the county had a study for the whole length of the 22 miles of Gulf Boulevard, and to make it similar, the full length. And where did that study go? Is it dead? Did they even follow through with it?
I believe that they're moving forward. Linda might have a better idea than I do, but I know that in Indian Rocks Beach, they're actually implementing some portion of something to do with that. I followed it in the news.
Right. Some of the Gulf Boulevard changes you've been seeing as you come along have been part of that project and the study, including the undergrounding and things of that nature. But we'll pull that up and see what their time frame is on the schedules.
And I guess because one of the things that I was thinking about, once you move into Bel Air and you go through Indian Rocks and down to, I guess, Indian Shores, it's a 2-lane road. And then somewhere in the Reddingtons or whatever, North Reddington, it turns to a 4-lane road. And I was wondering if there was anything in that plan that said, let's make it a 2-lane road all the way or something like that, with beautification on each side, walkways and stuff. That's kind of where I was looking at.
I don't think there's anything in the plan about reducing the width of the existing 4-lane section, but we'll definitely pull that up and see what the long-range projection is. I can appreciate that interest, because a lot of places have done that with the big state roads that carved their path right through the middle of their towns, have been able to bring them back down to a 2-lane road with lots of extra, like, bike lanes and pedestrian ways and wider sidewalks and things. So it's been done in other places. I'll pull up the study and we'll bring that forward too.
Yeah, and that's the reason I brought the walking, that type of thing. And I was just kind of curious where that study was, or if I could take a look at it.
Sure. We'll get a hold of that for you.
Thank you.
And as I think I've said before, I would be all for the idea of reducing the speed limit, making it not a throughway, but actually you've arrived in Madeira Beach, slow down and see what we have to offer.
The study stated that 30 to 35 miles an hour is the best speed for continuous movement of vehicles through the process, rather than 45 miles an hour, because you get more people through at 30 to 35 miles an hour than you do at 45 miles an hour,
Right.
which sounds odd, but they're further apart because of the speed.
And the stoplights.
And stoplights, yes.
Yeah, I'm like, so historically, transportation engineers are traffic engineers, and their whole idea is to move traffic. And, we're a place, respect the fact that you've arrived somewhere, and maybe there's something here that John's Pass Village, or, this municipal center with the Parks and Rec, the beach accesses, there are things here to enjoy, and, I think that we need to think of the city as a destination as opposed to a place to go through to get somewhere else, like Clearwater.
Yeah, page, some different traffic patterns on there. Any other questions?
So, Mr. Chair, it's up to you how you want to conduct this. We can go individual by individual. We could heart-achingly go page by page to the Duwani plan. It's up to you.
Well, why don't you, you're the one who knows it best, so what are your major concerns, and we'll start there.
I don't really have any concerns per se, but I don't live here, so I'm looking at it much as a planner, and I think it's a pretty good plan, even today, almost 20 years later. But I think, in 20 years, things do change, and so, what we really want to make sure is we don't start pulling things into a mobility plan for 2020 and beyond that were designed in 2002 and don't make any sense today. And if there's no heartburn, that's fine. We can go ahead and distill a plan from this and bring that back to you all, and we can go from there.
Okay, you had mentioned some concerns that might be outdated. You don't have any that jump out at you?
I don't personally,
Okay,
no.
All right. Does anybody else have any that, Ray?
Sure, I'll start us off. In the Duwani plan, it suggests that there should be 3 community gathering places, one being Johns Pass, the other Madeira Way, but then one at 140th. A large majority of the population, the residents, live back in that section, in that center section. I think that's a great idea. But right there at 140th, you have a large condominium apartment complex, and you also have an established, Sweet Burnett, another section there for residential. So I don't see any of that going away. I mean, it seemed to be in good condition.
Yeah, my understanding is that Sweet Brunette kind of follows the idea of what Duwani was looking at in terms of that hub, but the other 3 corners are kind of built and they're not old, and so their redevelopment potential is probably not rapid or high, and so it may be difficult. But if you have something in a plan and a redevelopment comes forward, then you have the opportunity to say, this is what we'd like to see. So
Right.
make sure what
I know
you're buying into.
Personally, we're excited that we have a restaurant within walking distance now, or will have, on Gulf Boulevard from that area. It's the only one that I can think of off the top of my head. And I was looking at the zoning map, and here again, we're just putting ideas out there.
Sure, no, absolutely. And if you could refer to the page, that might help everybody else.
I don't have a page.
Oh, not in this plan, the regular zoning map.
Just off the zoning map.
Got
The adopted zoning for the city right now.
You have a section there that intersects with 140th and is parallel to Gulf. It's Palm Street, Palm
Yes.
Avenue.
Mhm.
Now that's all designated as, it's all zoned as residential. But just, if you can follow me for a minute, I've looked at different areas like snapshots here, and they have a similar section, and you might research, that parallels. It's not right on the water, but it's 1 block off, and it's zoned commercial, but it does have traffic can go through there. But at certain intersections, they do have it blocked off strictly for walking or biking. And it becomes a gathering place for the residents. We enjoyed our time with our daughter there Thanksgiving, and it was a major collective place for the residents to come. The streets were full, and I don't think it wasn't tourists, it was the residents, because it's an ongoing event.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought something like that might be of interest to at least explore.
For Palm.
I'm
Can I
sorry?
piggyback onto?
Palm?
Palm Street, yeah.
Yeah.
Palm Street.
Yeah, if you look at Palm Street, piggyback onto that, we're talking about, if you look at the Duwani plan on page 15, the 3 neighborhood centers,
Yes.
Where the, it looked, Madeira Way is coming along, obviously, the way they had intended. Hopefully John's does some of that. But to your point, Ray, the Crystal Island Neighborhood Center, if it wasn't necessarily at the corner of 140th and Gulf, but did shift a little bit to the north, that makes sense. And then if there was something in the Johns Pass district, where we're talking about a redevelopment plan for Pelican Lane, that would sort of run, parallel's the wrong word, but congruent with that if you had the main thoroughfare and then a street behind it that had some sort of redevelopment plan that would allow a little more generous use boulevard in the middle of Madeira around Palm, like Ray's talking about, where there is some more, creative uses of the properties that are there. There are some apartment buildings, some duplexes, some single-family homes, and then it kind of dead ends at the rally there on 100.
I'll circulate these.
So that'd be kind of interesting to figure out a way to kind of bring that, because, Madeira Way is a block and a half or whatever, and then if you have Johns Pass, you have Village, Village Boulevard, and then Pelican Lane, and then you had Gulf Boulevard and Palm Street. It'd be kind of a neat little 1, 2, 3 as you go down the beach, so you get two little areas
Right.
to work with.
So, I mean, in the Duane plan, it references Naples. I've never been to Naples, so I can't visualize that. But I've been to St. Augustine, and they have George Street. Again, it's just pedestrian. And I don't know how you get from Square A to Square B, but if it would have to be an incentive for residents already on Palm Street to take advantage of any zoning changes or, and then you could architecturally have mandates that go along with that.
Yeah, on the mobility side of it, obviously we're looking at the right-of-way itself, but in terms of the land use on either side of that right.
Well, it all goes together, hand in hand. So that would, in mobility, on the comprehensive plan, the transportation element, and the first thing it talks about is increasing bike use and walking traffic. And I've been at Board of Commissioners meetings, and they've asked about golf carts, the golf cart community, people, uses. So it may be something to consider.
Absolutely.
And just to further that whole idea, you can tell I took a little time to think about this.
I'm glad.
When you come across the 150th Causeway, you had mentioned someplace, a parking garage. You don't want it right on Golf, and you don't want it right on 150th. You don't want it conspicuous, I'll say. But if they're talking about different designs with the marina land there, and if there was a way to not only have on-land busing or trolley or whatever, but it would be a great little ferry to go from the marina to the dock on the Intracoastal side right there, this close to Palm Street. And it's already a street, so it's already there. You would just need a dock. So you would have a regular ferry between the parking lot. So you would decrease the tourist traffic to the, on Golf by using the trolley or the ferry. It would just be a place to come for the day.
Yeah, and the ferry could go on to Johns Pass as well.
But then you're in conflict. Is Palm Street, is this something more for residents or is it more for visitors? So you have that to balance out. But again, it all starts with a discussion.
Sure. And where would be the ferry landing? At Palm,
I didn't bring my glasses.
Which intersection or what's?
It would be north of 140th, so maybe two streets up. Do you know what street that is that would intersect, that runs perpendicular to Golf?
140th where Sweet Burnett is, and then that's, is it Vivian right there, or Miramar? I forget which one it is. But then it comes through,
You're not up to the gas station yet, it's the one between,
Right, then
Just south
at the
of-
gas station, 143rd.
just south of that,
That
Yeah.
is,
whatever that street is.
And if you think about what's there, like on 141st, you've got the supermarket on Gulf Boulevard.
Right,
And then there's a
you have
vacant
an
lot
empty
behind
lot.
it. Hmm?
You have an empty lot there.
Yeah, and then across the street from that supermarket's an empty lot, which I guess is going with the
but
new restaurant.
But for the residences, for milk and bread and whatnot,
Mhm.
if you just, not necessarily.
There's a lot of potential there to
Your
do
weekly-
something on Palm.
Yeah, but you could
Really
have, you could
interesting.
have that, you could have a pizza place, you could have,
Mhm.
different places to come and gather. You could have it so that you have plenty of outside awnings and tables and just
Instead of zooming by everything on Gulf Boulevard.
again, a neat place a destination.
Mhm. We're definitely seeing a lot more golf carts around. I
And
have one.
it would be a place that Madeira Beach
really fun.
could set up for events. It used
Yeah.
to have events on Madeira Way. So you'd have people coming down from the Reddingtons for the day,
Mhm.
for those events, or up from Treasure
I
Island for the day.
think we're missing some of the little mom and pop type stuff too, some of the, like, on your pictures from Naples and Neptune Beach, you have that off street. If you go to Naples, I was just there, you have Fifth Avenue, which is the main super high-end drag with all the Rolls Royces and Maseratis and, Lamborghinis on the street. But then for a block on each side, there's also very walkable, and it's smaller art galleries and coffee shops and, just neat little
Right.
neighborhood type places, and that would be a really, really cool thing to foster out here. We
So-
have everything built right up on the street, because when they widened Gulf Boulevard, they took the front of everybody's buildings, so like my building sits right, I'm pretty close to Gulf Boulevard now. Used to be able to park in front before they widened it, now you can't. And so the parking becomes an issue, and everybody just tears by, and you sort of miss it in the flash while you're trying not to run somebody over.
Right.
It'd be neat to have a little neighborhood experience. I think that's a great idea.
So if it's currently zoned and the plan is for it currently to be residential, what you might be looking at is a mixed-use opportunity?
Correct. Yeah, live, work
I would
would be
say
cool,
neighborhood
You've got
level.
retail and galleries and then
And
apartments above it.
maybe you still have residential up above.
Right, a live-work situation.
I don't know the zoning. Right now, I think that area is R2.
Yes, it's R2. But that's what we're going to be talking about with the comp plan is not only what zoning do we have to work with right now, but what would serve the community best. We'll be redefining our zoning categories, updating them for the land use level in the comp plan, and then we'll have to come back and amend for the zoning code to match it and support it with more detail on, how you use the land on a case-by-case basis. So we've certainly got a lot of room to work with because our zoning code is wholly inadequate right now. You really almost have to have a PD to build anything, and you don't want to be in that situation where we're requiring people to come in and create a zoning for themselves every time they want to develop, and then we're just at the whim of whatever the market chooses or out-of-towners decide it ought to be on that space. So this is the time for you to decide, what do we need the community to look like? It's not going to change into something else overnight, but if you see spots like that, like Jerry said, if you don't adopt it, it'll never happen. So you need to really have a plan. What would you want it to look like, and then how would the regulation read that got you there?
But we don't have the population and we don't have the financial that a place like Naples does. And we do have, Johns Pass is one of the #1 tourist destinations
In the region.
And
Yeah.
to me, that should be that, other than if you wanted to do something specific for residents. But I live off 140, I don't want a lot more traffic.
Mm-hmm.
Very residential through that area. And I just think that we have certain areas that are already designated as high tourist traffic areas. And I think once Madeira Way gets finished, that's going to be a charming area. But I don't see, other than if it's just going to be, I don't think many residents want more traffic in that area.
Mm-hmm.
That's a heavy, densely populated part of Madeira Beach.
Yeah, and the discussion I'm hearing, I don't think is more traffic in terms of automobiles, but it might be a pedestrian type situation.
Well, if trolleys and all of that, that's gonna cause a lot of, I mean, we've already been through the trolley thing, I mean, the, ferry thing or whatever, and it was a bus, so I'm just saying, I don't know in that residential area, it's fine if it's a park or something for use for the residents, but I personally wouldn't think it's pretty cool to have more tourists coming through there. They already parked there to go to the beach.
Well, I don't think we're talking about going down 140th, because Palm Street's the very first one when you come in 140th, and it parallels Gulf Boulevard from 140th to 143rd. I mean, in my head, that's what I'm thinking about. It's just
Right.
that one street, and right now it's apartment complexes, vacant lots, multifamily, one apartment building got converted to condos, and then a few sprinkled single-family homes in there. So if you were to do like a little neighborhood survey, you'd see a very conglomerate use there. It's just not, nothing's very cohesive or homogeneous in there. And you do have some bigger apartment buildings, so they generate their own amount of traffic. And then there's the condo at the corner of 140th and Gulf. I always forget the name of that place, but you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I do.
So you can't do anything with that, but going north from there, and some of the houses there are not terrific.
Yeah.
It would be,
That's true.
it would be nice to see somebody do, like cottage-style businesses like you see on the side streets in other areas, where they have little art galleries, and it's very walkable and more friendly to be open, but it doesn't drive traffic back into the neighborhood because it's only one block off Gulf, so you wouldn't necessarily bring trolleys and buses onto that street. They would stop on Gulf Boulevard, and they walk that one short block, which is probably not 150 feet, to get to Palm Street.
Right, I mean, it's definitely a conflict, and I feel exactly that. It's a conflict as far as, do you want to bring more tourism into your backyard, your residence, but it's also, I'm not looking at traffic. That's why I took those pictures that it's strictly bike entrances or very limited access with vehicular traffic. The ferry thing just was an
And I
idea
think
just
it's,
because, we are, whether people want it to be strictly a fishing village, a little residential, we're beyond that. You can't, but I don't want to go
I don't
the
feel
other
that.
extreme either.
I don't feel that. I just feel like we have established areas that still need a lot of tweaking to be brought up to snuff. I mean, Madeira Way is still, even when this hotel, now we're just in standstill. And it's, it's still not very attractive at all to me. I mean, it's better than it was, but, and John's Pass, that's here again. A lot of people go there. And to me, to put resources there to continue, not necessarily to make it a continued fishing village, but to upgrade those areas that we've already established.
Well, it's a good debate.
it's just floating some ideas there, because definitely Pelican Lane, the people are already there, and it's probably one of the ugliest streets in the state of Florida. And you look at the back of the businesses that are pretty much thriving with tourists on one side, and it would be great if they could wander around and walk in the back. And then there's a few residential houses, and we've always said that when we were talking about this plan before, that should be more open to a little art gallery, or one of those houses can be converted to a restaurant. You could have a lot of different ideas there. The parking is going on there now, and we tried to move in that direction, and it turns out now there's just fishing boats there that are tied up. That's not really what the idea was. You drive down Pelican Lane, I feel so bad for those residents. It could be such a bonus to the city, and they just stare at dumpsters and ugly parking lots, and the businesses overflow junk, whatever they have out back. There's the heaters that they don't use in the summertime, and they're just sitting in the parking lot. And it should be encouraged for the back of those businesses. Like if you've ever been to Key West, you walk through a business, you go out, be like, wow, there's a whole nother street now, like old Key West, the way it used to be. And you walk out, Pelican Lane is ripe for that. It's a great idea to do it on Palm, but I think that the residents would be a lot of kickback against it. But I think on Pelican Lane, people have been wanting that, and they undergrounded the utilities 15 years ago down Pelican Lane, and they were going to do the other side streets, 129, and it just stopped. I don't know what ever happened to it. Yeah, it's a tourist area.
Commissioner Hearn, we have to have your microphone on.
If you live there, in that area, you expect that. I used to live on 129, and it's highly tourist. Even back then, that was like 5 years ago. But that area, to me, makes sense to do something and upgrade it because it's already there and established. And it's an eyesore, just like Madeira Way is.
So would it be a consensus to look at the recommendations that Duane made in terms of Pelican Lane and bring those forward?
And it's a good discussion for Palm. I mean, I've never thought of that, but, you're looking basically at an older street, real small lots, empty lots, because nobody can really build anything there, and the back of some businesses. I mean, it makes sense if you could have a little neighborhood type thing, but you don't want to generate traffic to the area. But if it's more bicycles walking to it and you just wander around, oh, look at this little street, there's a little cafe, a little coffee shop, and people can make it work and the neighborhood's into it, I think it's worth looking at. It's definitely a good idea.
And those are issues of scale, and
Mm-hmm.
the comprehensive plan can contain, and then the land development code can provide more direction in terms of how that becomes implemented.
So that's something I think that's a great idea. With the mixed use is the way a lot of places are going. Apartments above it, then you walk outside and you're not getting in your car. You're walking and riding your bicycle. We have an excellent planning developer here that gives us little history lessons on all of that.
Oh, I was
I
just
think
about to go into that, too.
I think if it's possible to change the zoning to mixed use, and I don't know what that's called, or so you don't have high rises on Palm Street,
Right.
but you have the little shops or whatever, because there's actually a whole lot of people in that area that are on those beach condos and stuff that come out, and they end up driving to uptown, or they drive to John's Pass or whatever, and if they could run out and run across the street and go to the new Caddies, or they could go to some place that's right behind where the 7-Eleven is, go get a pizza or something like that, and then go see a little art studio in a house that used to be a house, but now it's an art studio. I think, you're not creating a lot of driving traffic in that area, but you're creating the foot traffic where you want to keep people in that area and they don't get in their cars. So that's what we're trying to do, is to make it so, my idea is that we're trying to make it so people can walk to whatever event they want to go to, because they can go to the beach, they can go eat at a couple of restaurants, they can go see a couple of art shows. So is that just mixed use, or is it?
Yeah, we could have several different types of mixed use. In some places they have mixed use neighborhood scale, mixed use community scale. I mean, you can scale it up depending on how intense you think the area can handle it. We just have to define that out in a way that's consistent with the way the community wants to develop. So certainly that's doable. It's done in a lot of different places, especially in the older, smaller scale downtown areas. And it's consistent with what the intent was behind the plan. Whenever Duane's working on a plan, he's working on this 5-minute walk, a quarter-mile walk. The idea that people will leave their car behind if they only have about 5 minutes to walk to where they're going. So the scale that's drawn here is that distance. And the reason there's 3 places is because he was looking at kind of nodes of where commercial already was that you could build on at a decent small scale. And he's usually looking at most 5 stories, maybe less, where you're just tucking small side-by-side units in to kind of create a density. You don't want it spreading all over the place either, but if you've got up next to Gulf and Palm way down there where it's already impacted by commercial, if you could find ways to specify what kind of uses would go in and how intense you want them, and also limit the way that automobiles move around in there, because this planning group, and actually planning generally nowadays, is looking at trying to create enough interest throughout the city that, as you say, Mr. Preston, people do not have to get in their cars to go to. If they will walk, if they can walk, they will. And then gradually you decrease the overall traffic, the ambient traffic on the roads. Because especially on vacation, if you don't have to get in your car and find a parking space in a strange city, you won't do it.
Right.
So that's the idea. But you would definitely want to manage it so that it's not creating an impact on the stable neighborhoods behind, because the residential behind that is a lot of smaller homes on old lots that already have some setback issues, and so it's hard to redevelop on those. We don't want to do anything that puts undue pressure and threatens a neighborhood that's already got a lot of issues to deal with in terms of survival. We have to you always have to look at that in comprehensive planning. The whole idea is to make everything compatible and supportive, intersupportive.
Yeah, it just sounds like a place, from what Ray was saying, that, the neighborhood would be able to walk and ride their bicycles to, and not have to get on Gulf Boulevard and drive to north or south. Good idea.
And I agree with Michael that, our first priority at this point, I think, ought to be Pelican, because that is such a horrible thing.
Mess.
You got outdoor cooking trailers that are throwing up stuff and grease, and just it's filthy.
It is.
So, Mr. Chair, Commissioner Kerr, were you done, or did you have a few more?
I just had a couple
Please.
things. I mean, I was going to reference how well Candy Kitchen does, just from people walking to it from the condos on the Gulf side. And that's strictly, that might be a half-hour thing. It's not increasing traffic or anything like that. But speaking about the mobility, to change gears here a little bit, and Madeira Way, has anyone thought about, I don't know if it be for or against, I'm just putting it out there as another idea, when you come off of 150th and you pull on Madeira Way, it's always been a shortcut to go to the Reddingtons. Well, that's been alleviated leaving the Reddingtons because it takes you strictly out to Gulf Boulevard. But what if between the last 100 feet of that going out to Gulf Boulevard, that were strictly a bike lot, or that lane be eliminated on the Gulf Boulevard? I've heard at the Board of Commissioners meetings that that's a hazard with pedestrian traffic across Gulf Boulevard. And
Yes, they were talking about putting up a light or a sign that prohibits right turn going towards the Reddington on Madeira Beach, because people will just kind of swing around there, and there's a crosswalk just on the other side of the intersection, and they'll just drive potentially right into people because they don't bother to stop. And so we have been looking at that even now, even though there's a set plan for Madeira Way, because it doesn't really work the way they have it designed and planned. There's this jog at Municipal Way that prevents you from seeing oncoming traffic, and it doesn't really provide enough of a queue for right turn lanes, so all the trips are merged together there at the intersection. So there are some issues we have already been looking at and talking to the developer about as the next phase comes on. So I don't think that it's out of the range of possibilities to talk about redesign of the roadway there, since it's public space anyway. We can request and require other types of development as the rest of that site plan is implemented. We have to be careful, though, about creating just pedestrian type thing. What we would be doing is forcing all the trips along Municipal Drive back over to 150th. And that probably wouldn't affect anybody on the north side of Madeira Way. On the south side, maybe not, but we do have to be careful about that, because I've worked on a lot of projects over the years, and I'm sure Jay has too. In some spots, making something no automobiles kills out the business. You know, it's better, you don't want too many pedestrian-only mall areas. It's better to make it really uncomfortable for the cars, but to allow them to go through, because you still need people to have a sense. They like to drive past something before they get out of their car, and you can really get in front of the building and feel comfortable with it, you know, before they find a place to park. But it's always worth talking about, but we do really need to be careful about that.
Just a thought, I mean,
Yeah.
if you're coming from the south, you'd still have an inlet to go
Yes.
to the post
Yeah.
office or any of the shops or whatever, and you'd still be able to continue in that same direction. But I just know that when you go to the post office, with that traffic coming through there, sometimes it's difficult to back out into the traffic, because there's, even with the speed bumps, the traffic is slow, but it's constant.
Yes.
So if I were to try and capture this thought, would it be like no through traffic?
You would have through traffic if you were going what I'll call north
Yep.
from 150th past the Cambria. If you were going out on Gulf, you'd be directed to Municipal Way, which after you did that once or twice, you wouldn't do that anymore. If you wanted to get out on the Gulf, you'd go down to the intersection of Gulf and 150th, which I think is the traffic pattern that is being promoted. So that wouldn't interfere.
You just want to make the shortcut less attractive.
You want to stop it. You want to stop it from being a thoroughfare.
Right.
Madeira Way.
It would be a destination, but not a thoroughfare. And I don't.
Madeira Way.
Madeira Way.
And then municipal would be the relief valve.
If you're going north, yeah.
Or even south for them.
Right, yeah. But I'm just saying that you wouldn't come off of 150th and take Madeira Way Municipal to turn left, or even to turn right. It would just wouldn't, unless you had an accident or something. It would be a relief. As Linda mentioned, they're already talking about removing the right turn.
Yes, sir. Or you don't want them to turn on red, definitely, but
Yeah.
they're looking at what the options are, if they need a sign there, or they need a no turn on red or something to make sure people are not just
And that would make people
turning right,
stop from going that way.
right,
Part
stopping,
of your
automatically.
plan is you have to find places for bicycle.
Yes, right,
Right.
You know, that could all be
yeah.
Yeah, they do
sidewalk,
that.
and you could make it
So,
put a
Some of the,
canopy over it. I don't know.
some of
Just
the
a thought.
discussion in the BOC was to put a no right turn on red, like they do at the elementary school, or at the Dare Beach Fundamental School, when the crosswalk is in use. Because that's when the people are running, close to running people over, is when they're turning right and not stopping,
Yeah, and I
with
think,
the people walking in there. And then the other part of that conversation was that when the people are in that crosswalk, is to make it a left turn arrow so that they can go south on Gulf Boulevard if they're walking east and west in that crosswalk going over to Archibald.
yeah, and those conflicts are captured in the Dwani plan. I mean, he captured many more along Gulf Boulevard, but that particular area, and even as it redevelops, how people are going to transition from that area to the beaches and across Gulf Boulevard is going to be a concern. Did you have anything else, Commissioner Kerr?
Not at this time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Another good idea. Yeah, they do that, if you're heading south on alternate 19 in Dunedin. You're sitting there and to keep people from their little downtown, no right on red, and they got a big, sign, lit up, arrow, big, a red line Ghostbuster type thing to it. And you just sit there and there's nobody crossing or anything, but it allows the people down the street from the park to be able to cross and get across, so. Okay, anybody else have any ideas? Mobility plan.
One
Sure.
of the things that it's been brought up in the BOC a little bit, but we, as the Planning Commission, we may want to think about it a little bit more, and that is the park at Johns Pass on the beach side there. And they were, there's been some discussion about a parking garage there rather than just the standard parking lot that they have there, with a event center on top. There's a lot of people that actually turn around from Johns Pass when it's busy and go someplace else because there's no place to park. And we want people to come here and stay and utilize the restaurants and the businesses and the shops and stuff like that, because that's good for the whole city as a whole. So I would encourage more thought about a potential parking garage in that area. Not, you know, a few stories high with the event center on top, where
Yeah, so internally, we've had some conversations about parking garages and potential locations. That's one of them. In my estimation, it's probably the most problematic, given its proximity to the Gulf, in terms of storms, sea level rise, all of that. The other areas that have been discussed just briefly are this area, and primarily engaging with maybe the library or Winn-Dixie or something like that, the High and Dry, and Publix. And looking at those are kind of the gateways to the city: Johns Pass, the Dumie intersection, and then in this area. And if you were to be able to get people out of their cars and into something either PSTA or PSTA supplemented, you know, it's kind of like Las Vegas writ large. If you go to Las Vegas, you check into a hotel, you're in that hotel, and you're basically stuck with all their amenities unless you get a cab or some form of transportation. Public transit it's a mile walk to get to the road, it seems, and then another mile walk to get to the next hotel. So the whole idea is internal capture, and it's by design. You know, Madeira Beach could be that way as well, getting people out of their vehicles and into a local transit system, and keep them here for a day, you know, or longer in terms of staying in hotels and rentals and such as that. So that parking garage idea that I threw out initially, that's kind of sort of what we've talked about. I don't know that there are any better locations, but, you know, certainly open to that idea. But if the LPA is supportive of exploring that idea, that is something that's not in the Duwani plan, right, that we could add into the mobility plan moving forward.
you want to stick to the Duwani plan?
No, I want to go outside of the Duwani plan if you guys think it's important. Duwani was not going to accommodate motor vehicles at all. It's just not his way. But they're still here, and they're going to be here for a while. And the idea is, if you can get people here in their car, get them out of their car, and get them into the ambience of the community through other forms of transportation, be it biking, golf carts, you know, a local trolley system, the ferry, you know, any of those things, it's just all the more reason to slow down and enjoy where you are, as opposed to staying in your car.
You know, and I think that's why it's so important to develop the Pelican area, the potential of the Palm area, and then absolutely the Madeira Way when it's completed, you know, whenever that is. Just out of curiosity, when do they have to start on that pie-shaped portion?
On the triangle for Madeira Way. Well, they've got quite a bit of time. They have 15 years for build-out. Their timeline was that they had to pull a building permit within a certain amount of time, a building permit within a certain amount of time of the PD being approved and any kind of lawsuit settled, and they met that criteria. They had like a year from the first approval, and the rest of it is phased according to their needs. They had up to 15 years to build out. There's been constant interest in that. Obviously, the situation with COVID has really set it back. There's been concern on every group that's come in, interviewing and talking about the development, the redevelopment there. There's been concern about the amount of retail that they would have to build, because it had like 40,000 square feet of retail in it, which is a lot given the very loose population. It's not a very dense population for support of a major retail center at that location. They are able to alter it, however, and they can include their restaurants as part of the retail, and they can also reduce the retail by a certain amount. And the other groups just didn't really pay a lot of attention to the flexibility that's worked in the PD. But they're busy talking to new people again now. So there's always the possibility that something would get going fairly soon. I think anybody who ultimately takes hold of it are going to want to develop pretty quick, because nobody wants to sit on a piece of property they spent that kind of money on. So they're constantly negotiating on that big piece.
Is that PD set in stone now?
Yeah, that PD is set. If they wanted to change anything, there's certain aspects of it that are just hard, that we cannot wiggle on at all, because they were so specifically defined in the PD itself. And every time somebody comes in with a new concept, we have to go through, well, you can do this part of it or that part of it, but not this and not that, based on how they designed the PD to begin with. But nobody really...
Height is one of those? And the height is one of those?
The maximum height is, yeah. They can go lower, but they can't go higher. And it's I think 8 stories. It had started out as 11. They brought it down to 8 even before the last round, and it's stuck at 8 now as the absolute highest.
Thank you.
And with the parking garage, I know that in Johns Pass Village, the city owns that parking area. And the VFW was interested in doing a parking garage with the city, and they were going to have the top floor. I don't know if that's what you were thinking of, Robert, because I haven't ever heard of a parking garage going in the beach park over there.
Oh, that's just speculation, and,
Yeah.
Jonathan had talked about that a bit when he was here. We also know that there's, we've had neighborhood meetings on the proposal to put a hotel with excess parking garage in the Johns Pass area where the big parking lot is now.
The back on 129th, that's
yes,
about the one
between Boardwalk and 129th, yes.
And then across, I thought it was, we talked one time, I think it's like 130th, maybe 132nd, the city-owned parking on the west side of Gulf Boulevard.
Right.
That there could possibly be a parking garage there.
We haven't heard any talk of anything specific about that site. It's a smaller site, and it would end up building right in front of residential, the condos there. So, not sure how well they'd be received, but it's always possible. It's public land.
Well, those are just the ones I've heard people talking about.
And we've talked broadly about other areas that have large expanses of parking, such as the Publix parking lot. It's not that we've talked to Publix about that, but when you're in planning mode, you got to list out, well, what are our possible partners and our possible opportunities to work with somebody. And it's harder in a town that's built out as much as Madeira Beach is, even though there's room for redevelopment. It's broken up into a lot of very small lots, and so redevelopment of anything large is going to require a whole lot of cooperation, and Mike will tell you that's not always easy to pull it together. Yeah, it's very hard to do. And then we do have a lot of residential that if it redevelops, is likely to, we would think is going to redevelop as more residential, because there are just neighborhoods you have to protect and hold inviolate as neighborhood residential. There's also a lot of opportunity for redevelopment along the beach and Gulf Boulevard, and like you were talking about, Sweet Burnett's has that kind of look about it. It's pulled up to the sidewalk. You know, you feel like you can walk right in, and that it's comfortable to get to. It's interesting as you're going down the sidewalk, that sort of thing. In years past, a lot of the commercial that was developed here was almost built as if it was out in the subdivisions or on some strip mall. You know, you've got all this parking up front that people are walking by. It's not very interesting. It doesn't support pedestrian movement. It's not the comfortable mixed-use atmosphere that you're looking for nowadays. And also, it does not encourage or tame traffic, because people driving by parking lots are driving faster. If there's something to look at along the street and there's people on the sidewalks and potentially bike lanes or even parking along the road, it slows everything, it tames everything down and makes it just generally safer to walk in. So there are a lot of design issues that we can look at when we get to the design phase. They need to be supported by the very things you're talking about, which is the mix of use, or where you want to put it and how you foresee it would need to work in order to improve those areas, but also support and protect the existing neighborhoods. So it's a good conversation. With the parking garages, you're looking at something big and bold. So you're going to put it someplace where it's already commercial or it's open.
Yeah.
One of the other things is the mobility is the speed of the vehicles. And brought it up earlier is that 30 to 35 is the most efficient way of moving traffic through the city rather than 45 miles an hour or whatever. And if you talk to the officers here, they don't do anything until it's 10 miles over the speed limit. They just flat don't do anything. And so an example would be Gulf Boulevard. I know it's a county road or state road or whatever, but there's other places on Gulf Boulevard that's down to 30 miles an hour. So that makes it 40 miles an hour.
Right.
It's still slower than
50.
than what it is now. And the same thing coming off over Tom Stewart Causeway, where it's 40 miles an hour, and people are doing 50. That's way too fast coming into our city. I mean, that's kind of crazy.
So one of the easiest conversations you could have with Pinellas County would be reducing the speed limits.
Well, yeah, with Pinellas County, but it's a state road, you know, and
Yeah.
but the state has reduced parking or traffic, speed levels all over the state. I mean, it's their road, but it's your community.
Right.
And nobody has an absolute right or even need to be driving in a way that endangers the people that live there. You ought to have control over that. So I know that in the case of 150th, they were talking with DOT about lowering the speed limit there to 35. We've been talking about that at meetings. And as you said also, having it high doesn't necessarily mean people are going faster. It just means they have to screech their brakes every time they're stopping, because we still have crosswalks and street lights and things anyway. So, you know, if that's a community goal. It's certainly a mobility policy that we do want traffic to move through town, but we need them to do it in this particular way to protect ourselves.
In a safe way.
In a safe way,
In a
yes.
safe way.
At safe speeds. So you can have policies in there that call on the state or the county or whoever's in charge of the facility to provide it in a way that's in keeping with your own comprehensive plan. As long as it's adopted policy, that's the really best place to start remembering that all the surrounding communities, including the county, and eventually the state to some degree, are all supposed to figure out ways to be compatible with your plan. You just need to be well reasoned in your decision making and you know, have community strength about it.
So if our plan, it says to reduce the speed limits within the town to a reasonable speed, and it's in our plan, then they will try to, because it's submitted to the state, correct?
Right. They will, hopefully, I think it would have to be in your plan for them to really take it seriously. And hopefully you'd be able to work with them more if it was a community-wide policy. They knew what they were dealing with. Anytime they make big changes, they usually have community meetings anyway. But I think they've had to reduce speed limits often enough and narrow down roadways that it's become pretty common knowledge that the roads were too wide going through residential and commercial small town areas, that created all kinds of problems. It served as the death to most downtowns. You're fortunate you've got Johns Pass and the beach here, because if not, a highway flying through at 45 miles an hour was a guaranteed death to your commercial sector. Nobody stops at businesses it drives by at 40 miles an hour, 40, 45, 50 miles an hour, that you just don't even see it. So to support your economic base and also protect the lives and the quality of your residential areas, it's reasonable policy to request the speeds on Gulf to be lowered.
Yeah, and once it's in your comprehensive plan, you're demonstrating to the state and the other reviewing entities that that is community consensus.
Yeah, I'd actually like to suggest you be very careful with that. If you start to reduce the speed on Gulf Boulevard, or even turn it into a two-lane, one-way in each direction, and you concentrate on that, there's going to be a certain amount of traffic volume coming through the area. It's just going to force it from Gulf Boulevard, a larger portion of that, back into the residential communities to get through.
Well, the speed limits in the residential communities are already lower.
Okay, but
And
now
they
you're
don't
talking about
connect.
lowering it to a similar speed.
No, they're 25 in the residential.
Right.
Or 20 to 25, depending on which area.
And they don't connect. Usually if people are using a grid to get around a thoroughfare, they can go up a block and over, and it connects through the urban area. In this case, when you get off of Gulf, you can only go a couple blocks and you've run into a dead end. And you wouldn't, if you're trying to get down Gulf, heading out into the neighborhoods isn't getting you where you're going. So it's...
Well, I'm not even talking about just visitors that are going through. I'm talking about residents that would typically go to Gulf Boulevard, go down to their intersection and pull back into their community, that if they find that it's a bit uncomfortable, they're going to try different solutions and be forced back into the residential community.
It's definitely important that you keep the
And I would say that the population, the residents, are much safer on Gulf Boulevard with the larger sidewalks than back in the residential communities.
Yeah, there's no sidewalks in most places. So it's definitely important if you do that, like has been discussed, that your residential neighborhoods do stay very considerably lower speed. And there are other traffic calming things we can do in the neighborhoods as well, to make the residential streets uncomfortable for cars. It's not that you don't want people driving on the roads, you just want them to take greater care when they do. And
I just think there should be more discussion on it, because, you don't want to make it so uncomfortable that people, it's not a level of service anymore that, that you're happy with the traffic pattern. I would suggest that many people are pretty happy with that traffic pattern. We still need, as I brought up before, lights over the crosswalks, and, safety, maybe more crosswalks. And that would calm the traffic on Gulf. But I would just be careful, because, and I would say it needs to be coordinated with the connecting communities, whether it's the Reddingtons or you know, so that this whole stretch of Gulf Boulevard, it's not going up and down and up and down. That becomes a hazard in itself. Because, you know, what is the speed limit? What am I supposed to, you know, people that are unfamiliar are going to be going over or under. You know, how big of a problem is it, is what I guess what I'm getting to. You know, every once in a while you see someone that's going a little over, but I think pretty much the 35 is stuck to. That's my personal opinion, anyway.
You know, if everybody here wants to get more park or speeding tickets, we can talk to Pinellas County and have them strictly enforce the speed limit, but I don't think it's that big of a problem out there right now where there's major accidents and, you know, yes, people should slow down and drive and respect the speed limit. That would be a better. I remember when it was 45, people were driving 55, and it was crazy on how fast people were going down a beach community. So I was against it at first when they lowered it, and it's much better now that they did. Lowering it again, I'm not sure would be good for the community. I think it would be too slow, but it doesn't seem to be that big of an issue, but it's definitely something to think about, and good idea, Robert, for to talk about with the mobility plan. It's definitely a big part of it. I mean, people drive right through the middle of our city.
I agree. The difference between a 5-mile difference from the north side of our limits to the south is like a minute and 20 seconds.
Yep, it's not that much.
It's really, for the amount of safety you get, it's not very much time.
Yeah, I think if we could add the mobility plan for the entire Gulf beaches, they should put another bridge out to Reddington Beach, and then they're not driving. You know, when you hear Clearwater complain about the traffic going out there, you're like, well, just build yourself another another bridge out to North Clearwater Beach from Dunedin, and, you know, that'll take care of your problem. So they should build a bridge for themselves up there, and we wouldn't have as much traffic just zipping through to get off, go to the mainland. But can we add that to the mobility plan? Can we tell them what to do?
Probably not.
Probably not.
All right, anybody else? Marilyn, you're quiet over there. You got any questions? Okay. Oh, good. Very good. Anybody else?
Yeah, I got just something to look into, and as we examine the plan, more than leaving things out of the plan, I think there's some things that are in the plan that we should probably highlight. One of the plan elements was they called for replacement of structures with different uses than are existing. And I don't have that page. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll look for it and I'll find it for you. That's why you saw me ruffling through. I was trying to find it again, but it's towards.
I'm sorry. Say the concept again.
It's one of the plan elements, so it's at the beginning, and it says replacement of structures with different uses than existing uses. So my question really is, have we looked into, or can we look into, changing some of the zoning overlays on some of the areas, similar to, like on Pelican Lane, because the waterfront side of Pelican Lane is R2, I believe.
3.
It's 3? Okay, my mistake, thank you. But still, it doesn't permit certain things to happen there. And then if we were to try and think forward thinking to Palm Street, if that's somewhere to go. But some of the areas that we're looking at, these town centers or these neighborhood centers that they called out, maybe that's an area to look at to throw some sort of an overlay on that would allow or help encourage that mixed-use type development in those particular areas. So just spitballing something out there to kind of encourage conformity with this plan that we spent all that money and time putting together. And I think it makes sense. We're seeing some of it happen, like the Skyline where Sweet Burnett is. I don't know if you guys have been here long enough, but that used to be a little mom-and-pop motel called the Skyline, and there were traditionally accidents at that intersection all the time, and cars would end up in the swimming pool. It happened like 3 times. There was, a car in the pool because the pool was the foremost thing out on that corner. And people were flying by. There was nothing to look at. Now you have something to look at. You got a really cool restaurant there with the windows. You see people inside. So that goes along with, on page 20 of the document, all buildings on Gulf Boulevard are dissimilar, and they're saying that you should encourage infill development with similar properties. like you were talking about, building the businesses up towards the sidewalk, very close to the right-of-way, makes it a much more interesting drive-by, and it will naturally slow people down, just because there's something to look at. Just like when you have, you know, the medians put in with tall trees, it slows people down because they don't see a long landing strip out in front of them where they can just see forever and fly down the road. Anything to break up the line of sight, but if there's something else to look at, it'll slow them down. And we see that on Gulf Boulevard. You have buildings sitting way back with parking in front, then you have other buildings right up on the sidewalk, and the parking is around back, and it's very confusing, especially for non-residents, to figure out, well, how the heck do I get into that place? One of the cool redevelopments...
As they're sailing by at 40 miles an hour.
Yeah, and dodging, you know, flashing yellow lights and people with dragon coolers and whatever, eating ice cream. One of the cool redevelopments is the West Event Center. I think that's a really neat project there, kind of a neat spot. But that area would have been really ripe for like a major, like from what's now the veterinarian and all the way down to the city-owned parking lot. That would have been a really cool place to just run that whole thing. And we were really close to having that, actually. I was that close. But those kind of things, I think, that's part of what this plan was forward-thinking, was looking towards, is taking some of those areas, redeveloping them with that live-work style, where you'd have the interesting things right up on the street, parking's in the back, livable space above it. If there's some way we can encourage that, I think if you look at areas like Naples, Neptune Beach, I'm trying to think of where else I just saw things like this. Anyway, that type of redevelopment, it encourages pedestrians, it encourages bicycles, it encourages the little electric scooters, stuff like that, and gets cars off the road. And it brings more of a sense of community. I mean, it's Gulf Boulevard, it's not Gulf Highway, right? The essence of a boulevard really is to be a neighborhood center with interesting things spurring off of it and a place for you to have a destination. We don't want to be the Missouri of the beaches where you just fly over them. You know, we want to have it be a destination where people slow down and stop and enjoy themselves. And I think they saw that. I think the Duwani plan saw that because we have all this lack of cohesiveness of development right along the boulevard, it's really just kind of strange for people. They don't know where to stop, so they just keep on trucking. Anyway. And then one other thing I saw in here on page 29 was to develop an appropriate, distinctive landscaping plan for streets within the neighborhood sub-districts. I think that would be great. Because we don't have sidewalks anywhere, there's really no landscape plan among the city. Not that that's a huge influence on the mobility, but I think it is a little bit because if it's more interesting to look at, people slow down, and it makes it safer. So, you know, I don't know if there's some way that in the right-of-ways only certain landscaping can be, or there must be something, or something to that effect that might be something to look into, too.
No, absolutely. And you know, the mobility plan, land use and mobility are inextricable, except that we have put them in separate elements in our comprehensive plans in Florida. And so what we may do in moving forward with the mobility plan is have a parking lot of ideas that would have to go into the land use element. And when we get to that point in the EAR, you know, we've got them proposed. The mobility can discuss how they relate in some extent, you know, but then later on, when we get into land use, we have to remember how those two relate. And I think that's not going to be a problem for this commission.
Cool.
One of the things that we're talking about, trying to get people to slow down and look at things, and as they slow down, the mobility of people walking and riding their bikes becomes easier for them. And driving down Gulf Boulevard, and you take a look at Madeira Way, same way, is some of the stuff really doesn't look very good. It's deteriorating. It's not kept up very well. And I don't know if there's a way that the city as a whole can give awards or whatever for improvements, for visual improvements, to encourage people to do improvements on their facade so that when people drive down Gulf Boulevard, they say, wow, that's a nice looking place, or hey, that's pretty cool. what I really like about driving through St. Petersburg is I really love those murals. I don't know, maybe some people don't, but I really enjoy them. Couple of things. They're beautiful. A lot of them make a statement. But there's a lot of talent that goes into making those murals, and things like that would beautify, I think, if done properly, would beautify our city and encourage others to do the same. So, and I catch myself slowing down and looking at the whole mural. And I've even turned around, came back, and stopped and looked at it. Because, like I say, a lot of them make a statement, and a lot of them are just plain beautiful. And I don't know if there's some way as a city we can encourage and, give an award or do something to encourage that type of beautification. It doesn't have to be murals, but some type of beautification. The West Center is much better than that location looks a whole lot better than the...
And the dry cleaner did.
The dry cleaner.
Dry cleaner.
And it was a bar, right? So I don't know if that's part of the mobility, but if people have something to look at, you don't want to distract them so much, but they will slow down because it's something pleasant to look at.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't believe any ideas are off the table with just talking about mobility, because we are going into a full-blown evaluation of your entire comprehensive plan.
Right.
So all of these ideas are fine. They may not make it into the mobility plan, but they may go into a parking lot.
They can go into land use or other places within the comp plan, like the art and public places.
Art and public places is what came to my mind, yeah.
Right. There's a lot of people have programs specifically focused on that, so there's programs out there for that have been successful elsewhere. We can look at what the options are for encouraging that. We don't actually prohibit it now. We do regulate it. Most places regulate it to ensure that you're not turning your building into a big sign for your product or your service. And it's becoming more difficult to regulate that because of the Supreme Court freedom of speech interpretations about signs. So we have to be careful with it. But we do have provisions that allow for it now, and maybe we can find ways to encourage that. Definitely could at least mention it in the land use to make sure that some specific program gets developed based on the land use requirement.
Ray, I think you had one more thing about mobility.
It was more of a question. You're talking about mobility. I won't say we've gotten off track, but with some things. But is there an original copy of the Duwamish plan that we can actually view? Because what I downloaded and printed out, you can't see, you can't interpret half. Yeah,
I know, and that's why I said that the newer members don't have a printed out version. We did provide the planning commissioner with that, and I didn't know which of you didn't have it, and I will make you a printed copy. You don't have it either? Okay.
Yeah, because
Magnifying glass?
So, show of hands, who doesn't have a 11 by 17 copy?
Right, okay.
The original is 11 by 17.
Yeah, I think we got them a while ago.
Yeah, you did.
Everybody might just need a new one.
I mean, I'll even try to scan an original, a good copy version. I have a...
We actually have a PDF that we got from Jones Edmonds, and so that's going to be the best way to print it out.
We'll make it.
Let me follow up on the rest of that. I'm sorry. My question is, not being able to see the diagrams, were there any diagrams there with options for bike lanes or for golf carts or for And was that directly on Gulf Boulevard?
There is a plan for Gulf Boulevard. There's also a plan for basically representative streets from, I think Gulf is what, 100 or 80 feet, and then there's a 60-foot, a 50-foot, a 40-foot. They have representative streets where they've done a section of, you know, what they're proposing, and actually I think there's 3 options
Right.
in many cases. So that's a lot easier to read in the actual 11 by
Larger size, right, we'll get that to you. And the other thing to draw your attention to, because everybody's been mentioning Pelican Lane and about how, you know, the plan talks about a mixed use or some option there, that's a pretty dramatic recommendation for Pelican Lane. And they felt that to make change work significantly there to deal with all of the problems associated with the parking and the dumpsters and everything on both sides of Pelican, that it would need to be reprogrammed altogether. And it's really dramatic. I mean, I think it's very creative and yeah, optimal. The idea that they had was to take the roadway and the houses or the residential uses that are along the water and swap them out so that the new buildings are back to back with the existing buildings on Village, and then the roadway is along the water. Then you could, you know, turn it into like a promenade. You know, people could walk down there. People who were in those buildings could still have their waterfront access, but just like on St. Pete and Coffee Pot Bayou, where you go across the street to get on your dock, they could still do it that way. The advantage to doing that, there were a number of them. It would get the garbage to the back and the parking between the buildings, the rears of the buildings, but that would require a whole lot of cooperation and some significant funding, because you got to reprogram or relocate all of your utilities underneath. So when you make reference to it, keep in mind that Pelican's not going to be that easy to deal with. We can put mixed use along Pelican on the water, but it's going to have to be very controlled, because there are residential uses right across the water and right around the bends, and they're already being threatened by the noise from those illegally parked commercial fleets. Now we're in the process we're in the process right now of code enforcing to get the illegal fleet parking out of there and the dock use. But that's not a simple thing, you know. So if we invite commercial back in there along that water, we have to consider just what the impacts are on all that residential too. So that have to be really carefully done. And then again, like you say, that some of it, if it was all redeveloped and you had parking on the ground floor, then at least people will be up a floor above the dumpsters and things like that. But you would just have a street with parking all along as you go. If you put commercial on the ground floor, those lots are very, very shallow, so it's going to be hard to arrange for parking in the back and certainly any ramp to get them onto the second floor for parking. So it's a tricky spot, and it's the reason, you know, all of that are the reasons it hasn't redeveloped, and that it was changed from R2 to R3 already to try to allow for more flexibility. You can put commercial in R3, but it has to be 20% of whatever residential floor area you have. So it's already a mixed use at a really low scale, but the thing that's preventing redevelopment in that area, just like all the way through town, is the height restriction. We have a 30-foot height restriction from base flood elevation to the eaves, and so you can only get 3 stories and then you can have a 10-foot pitch on your roof, but that's the max. So if you're working with a difficult piece of property and you can only go 2 stories over parking, you probably can't get your money back out of it. That's the thing that prevents those tricky areas from redeveloping. They would have to come in with a PD to go any higher, and that's also a very expensive process. But that, you know, and that's okay if that's what the community is intent on doing. Then the height restriction is working, if that's the intent.
Excellent, all good ideas. Thank you, Jerry.
Yes, sir.
And moving on from number 5, no old business, agenda item number 6. And then agenda item number 7, administrative presentation. Basically, Linda and I kind of met regarding the open discussion, and to do it properly, and not just, we're all just kind of bringing up and spitballing and rambling on a little bit about different topics to keep the meeting a little shorter and more organized. If anybody has a topic that they would like to bring up, you contact Linda and she will add it to the agenda. So if we're all in agreement, is that?
Yeah, it also keeps us out of the trouble of discussing something to become a quasi-judicial item along the way somewhere. Because if it's on the agenda, it's advertised, it's okay to discuss. But if, the one night we just got going and we're talking among each other about all kinds of things that hadn't been advertised, and it's scary. Because we don't really know what may show up on your agenda later, and it's better to have it on the agenda.
So what we were discussing here, because it wasn't on the agenda?
No, everything we were discussing tonight was advertised as being part of the mobility element discussion. We said we were going to be discussing this, and so that's what we did.
That's why we were trying to keep it tonight to just mobility and not talk about everything else.
And one night we didn't have anything on the agenda, and people just started volunteering new topics. So. But
it was kind of just an open discussion, and that just leads to too many.
Potential pitfalls.
Good way to put it. Yes, sir. So if you have something, she will add it under discussion, and that way we can all see and plan and come in and have a comment or two on it and try to keep our, comments to a minimum. We don't have to stick to like 3 minutes or anything, but that way the public also, if they want to chime in, then they can come in and talk about it. So that's what we talked about there.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, before you get on, I wanted to let you know, the Forward Pinellas program, which is Pinellas County's mobility program, among other things, they have a grant program, and I was going to distribute to you guys the information, so if you had ideas on that, we're looking at possibly applying for some assistance in exploring the idea of the parking garage, and maybe even getting some assistance on the high and dry, though I think that's a little...
Okay.
When Pinellas talks about mobility, I don't think they're talking about boats as much as they are cars. But anyway, I wanted to distribute that if I could.
Well, people should go to Publix more by boat. Yeah, I do. Thank you, Jerry.
Yeah, the state frowns on golf carts.
And then the other thing, under while he's passing those out, we can review these. Everybody should try to attend the commission meetings, and if you have topics, get up and speak. You said the next commission meeting on this is on Wednesday? This Wednesday coming up?
Wednesday at 6.
The 5th at 6 o'clock. Okay.
And Jerry, my first thing I brought up was on page 4.
Okay, great.
About the replacing structures with different than existing.
Thank you, sir.
Page 4, it's just in the premise area, sorry.
Oh. Make a note. And then the other item to bring up was, I guess a few members are up for reappointment, and we need the city clerk to contact them and let them know what they need to do if they want to be reappointed. That way we have to come in front of the commission, give a little talk. They used to just, if there was nobody else, I don't know if they still do this way, if nobody else was interested, they would just move you through to the next term.
Right, so very important that I'll be contacting the clerk myself to see why you weren't contacted or what's being done, because actually the terms expire this month for Commissioner Kerr, who you were filling in on once, and Commissioner Rappa and Commissioner Hearn. As important as everything we've been working on, can you imagine if next month we can't even sit the board, then we can't move through all these items, and we'd also hate to have to, if you're up to continuing to serve, it would be very difficult for us to show up next month and have to explain all this mobility and impact these stuff to people for the first time, because we have a whole new board. So, it's really important for the continuity. If you're still interested in serving, please contact the clerk and let her know.
Yeah, we have a good group. I'd like to keep it going. After that, our next meeting is September 7th, 2020, 6 p.m. And with that, this meeting will be adjourned. Thank you.